Unease already hung over Rosevale. Then came the accusation. At sunset, a messenger summoned Pastor Brian to answer claims he stole mission funds. He hadn't, but someone wanted him framed. Elias, the treasurer, confessed the money was moved with Brian's code, and a dangerous person knew the truth. He leaned in to name them, but froze as a shadow emerged from behind the old stone well. The Audio Pages presents The Accusation, a Christian romance of love, betrayal, and unshakable faith. Chapter 1. The Summons in the Orchard. The evening air in Rosevale carried that soft golden stillness, the kind that made Frere feel like breathing. Beneath the apple trees, Brian, Robert, and Davina stood hand in hand, the small preserved prayer cloth wrapped gently between their palms. It fluttered in the quiet breeze as if echoing the fragile calm the two had fought so hard to keep. They were planning a revival, a new beginning, a season of healing for the community. But peace rarely arrives without a test. A shout broke across the orchard. "Brian Robert!" A messenger stumbled toward them, dust streaked across his face, breathless. He held a red, sealed envelope, the kind only used for urgent matters from the regional mission office. He thrust it forward. "You're to report immediately," he gasped. "It concerns urgent allegations." Davina felt Brian's hand tense in hers. Allegations about what? But the messenger shook his head. "I wasn't told, only that you must come at once." He hurried away, leaving dust and dread. Brian opened the letter slowly. His eyes scanned down the page, widened, then closed as if bracing for an unseen blow. "Brian, what does it say?" He gave her the letter. Davina read the words, and that made her heartbeat stutter. "You are hereby summoned regarding discrepancies in financial records connected to the Roosevelt Mission Supply Fund. Critical concerns have been raised following the latest financial review. Present yourself before the Mission Council immediately." Davina looked up sharply. "Financial discrepancies? Brian, you've never mishandled anything. You're the most careful person I know." He started pacing, fingers pressed to his forehead. "The supply fund. I haven't touched a single coin outside protocol." "Then someone else did," Davina said firmly. "Or it's a mistake. You didn't do this." His silence wasn't guilt. It was fear of a stain that didn't belong to him. Before she could steady him further, footsteps approached. Pastor Joel emerged from between the trees, his expression heavy. "Brian, there's more." Davina's breath caught. "More?" Pastor Joel held out another folded paper. "The council received an anonymous report accusing you of misusing funds and forging signatures." Davina staggered. "Anonymous? Who would—" "Someone who knows enough to sound believable," Brian said quietly. Pastor Joel placed a hand on Brian's shoulder. "They've suspended your duties until the investigation is complete." The words felt like the ground cracking under them. Brian closed his eyes and whispered, "Lord, strengthen me." Davina grabbed his hand, trembling. "You're not facing this alone." Her voice broke. "If they don't believe me, everything God built through me could fall apart." "Then we rebuild it," Davina said fiercely. "Together." But before Brian could answer, another figure stepped into the orchard. Elias, the mission treasurer. Quiet, respected, trusted. But tonight, his eyes carried something else. Something heavy. "I heard what happened," Elias said softly. "Brian, we need to talk. Alone." Brian stiffened. "About what?" Elias exhaled, voice shaking. "About the financial records and something I should have told you weeks ago." Davina's pulse spiked. "What do you mean?" Brian asked. Elias stared at the ground. "Because the missing funds, they didn't just start. They started before." A cold breeze swept through the trees. Elias, Brian whispered. What are you saying? Finally, Elias lifted his gaze and the guilt there made Davina's stomach twist. I've hidden something for months, and if I don't tell you now, the council will uncover it first. Brian stepped forward. Elias, what have you done? Elias swallowed hard. The missing funds, they were transferred using your authorization code. Davina froze. Brian stared at Elias, stunned, but Elias wasn't finished. And someone else knows. He looked over his shoulder, voice barely audible. Someone dangerous. Brian's voice was a whisper. Who? Elias's breath faltered. That's why I came, because he's already looking for you. And Elias suddenly went silent. His eyes widened in horror, staring at something behind Brian and Davina. Davina turned slowly, heart pounding. Someone was standing afar off, watching them. And that was when the first twig snapped. Chapter 2. The Shadow in the Orchard. The orchard had never felt threatening before. Roseville was a peaceful place, a place where seasons whispered instead of roared, where prayers rose like morning mist, and where the apples bloomed faithfully each spring as though they remembered every promise God had ever kept. But now, the stillness felt wrong. Davina didn't hear the first twig snap so much as feel it, a small sound swallowed by the thick hush that wrapped around them. The fading light slanted through the trees, and every shifting shadow felt suddenly alive. Elijah's stare was fixed behind them, frozen in a terror that drained the color from his face. Brian turned slowly, breath held tight in his chest. Someone stood beneath the apple branches, a dark silhouette partially hidden by the gathering dust. Motionless, watching, as though waiting for something or someone. Davina's pulse hammered so loudly she felt it in her throat. Bryant stepped protectively in front of her, his back tense. Who was there? He called out. Voice steady, but Davina knew that steadiness. It was the calm he wore when storms tried to swallow him whole. The figure didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even breathe loud enough for them to hear. Elias shook visibly. He followed me, he whispered. I knew it. I knew he would find me before I could explain. Brian didn't look back. Who is he, Elias? No answer, just trembling. Davina took a shaky step closer to Bryant. Bryant, maybe we should... Before she could finish, the shadow turned, not toward them, but away, as if satisfied with what he saw, as if confirming something. Then he walked off into the deeper orchard, disappearing behind the trees with slow, deliberate steps. Not running, not hiding, almost expecting them to follow. A chill rippled through Davina. Why didn't he say anything? Who is he? Elias clasped his hands over his face. We shouldn't talk here. Brian exhaled slowly, as if grounding himself in a prayer only his heart could hear. All right, he said. We'll talk, but somewhere safer. Davina touched his arm gently. Brian, maybe we shouldn't stay outdoors. Not tonight. He placed his hand over hers, reassurance, but soft, but strained. You're right. Elias nodded frantically. Your study, he said. Go there. Lock the door. I'll explain everything. Davina didn't argue. She had never seen Elias like this, a man usually steady as oak branches in the storm, now shaking like a leaf ripped loose from the same tree. As they hurried out of the orchard, Davina glanced once over her shoulder. The trees stood still, the shadows unmoving. But she knew they were no longer alone in Roseville, not in the way they once believed. The path back to Bryant's place wound between tall hedges and rows of late summer grasses. Normally, the walk soothed Davina.
Tonight, every rustle felt like footsteps. Every whisper of grass felt like movement waiting just beyond sight. Bryant seemed to sense her fear. Without a word, he slipped his hand into hers. That single gesture steadied her. Even in fear, she felt anchored. Even in darkness, she was not alone. But she could feel the storm building inside him. The pressure of accusations, the betrayal implied by Elias, and the unseen threat stalking through the orchard.
When they reached the house, Brian unlocked the door and ushered Davina inside first, then Elias. He slid the bolts across the door, something he never did in Rosevale, before turning to face them. Elias, he said quietly, "What exactly are we dealing with?" Elias swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing as though the truth was lodged in his throat. I didn't think it would go this far," he stammered. "I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed, before the council became involved." Davina felt her stomach twist. He wasn't just hiding something, he was hiding something big. "Tell us everything," she urged. Elias nodded, wiped his palms on his trousers, and began pacing. And then the unraveling started. "It began months ago," Elias said. "Before the supply fund was restructured, I noticed small discrepancies, tiny amounts missing from the mission accounts. At first, I thought it was human error." Brian frowned. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elias squeezed his eyes shut. "Because I thought I could correct it quietly. I didn't want to burden you with something I believe was just clerical oversight. You were coordinating the community outreach, preparing for the revival. I didn't want to distract you." Davina exchanged the glance with Brian. That part felt believable. Elias had always tried to carry more weight than he needed to. But then, Elias continued, the missing amounts grew, and the pattern changed. Whoever was taking the money became more confident, or careless, or bold, Brian murmured. Elias swallowed. "Yes, bold. And that's when I discovered something that terrified me." He paused, hands trembling. Davina leaned forward. "What did you find?" Elias's voice dropped to a whisper. "I found that the transfers were being made using an authorization code linked to your identity, Brian." Brian's jaw tightened. "That's not possible." "I know," Elias said quickly. "That's why I panicked. Someone either stole your code or forged it, and whoever did it knew exactly how to make it look legitimate." Davina felt a dizzy wave wash over her. "So someone wanted the blame to fall on Brian?" she said softly. Elias nodded. "That was my fear." Brian sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead. Davina could almost see the weight pressing down on him, not just the accusation, but the pain of being betrayed by someone from within their own mission circle. "Elias," Brian said slowly, "who else had access to these records and to my authorization code?" The treasurer hesitated, and Davina's heart sank. When someone hesitates like that, the truth is rarely kind. "I didn't want to believe it," Elias whispered, "but I think someone high up in the mission system leaked your information. Someone who wanted this to happen." Davina gasped softly. "A setup? A deliberate one?" But Brian's expression turned more solemn than shocked. He had seen corruption before, subtle, quiet, masked behind good intentions. "It gets worse," Elias said. Brian's head snapped up. "Worse how?" Elias wrung his hands. "When I tried to trace the source, I received an anonymous message telling me to stop. A warning. And I thought maybe it was just someone trying to protect their privacy. But then," his voice cracked, "then I started receiving threats." Davina froze. Brian leaned forward. "Threats?" Elias nodded, tears filling his eyes. "Yes. Notes left on my desk. Messages slipped under my door. Warnings that if I kept digging, something would happen." Davina's voice trembled.
Elias, why didn't you tell us? Because, Elias whispered, I didn't want either of you to get dragged into this. He lifted his eyes, filled with guilt, fear, and something deeper, something like regret. But someone else got involved, someone who wasn't supposed to know. Davina's breath stalled. Who? Brian asked. Eliza's voice dropped to a haunted whisper. A man who started coming around the mission office at night. A man who knew the records better than I did. A man who understood exactly how to manipulate them. Davina felt her skin prickle. What man? She whispered. Elias shook uncontrollably. He calls himself Luther Hale. The name felt like a stone in a silent lake. Brian frowned. I've never heard that name. You wouldn't, Elias said, because he doesn't work directly with anyone. He operates from the shadows. Someone who has connections to those who want power without accountability. Someone who knows how to destroy reputations quietly. Davina shuddered. And he's the one who was in the orchard? Brian asked. Elias nodded, voice cracking. I think so. He followed me when I left the mission office. He knows I'm talking to you. He knows I'm confessing. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He warned me that if I revealed the truth, he would make sure none of us would survive the consequences. Davina placed her hand over her mouth, horrified. Brian rose from his chair slowly, not with panic, but with the heaviest solemnity of a man preparing for a spiritual battle he never asked for. He won't intimidate us, Brian said, voice low but unwavering. Whatever schemes he's working, God is still our defender. But the flicker in his eyes betrayed something deeper, a fear not for himself, but for Davina. She felt that fear like a whisper against her heart. Silence settled over the room, thick, suffocating, pulsing with the weight of truth. So, Luther Hale is the one freeing me. Yes, Elias whispered, and he's not doing it alone. Davina frowned. Then who is helping him? Elias lowered his gaze. I don't know, but someone inside the mission council is working with him. That's why the accusations came through so quickly, and why your suspension was so immediate. Brian pressed his lips together. He had suspected something, but hearing it confirmed was different. Worse. They want to silence you, Brian, Elias whispered. They want to destroy everything you've built, the outreach, the revival, the ministry impact, all of it. Davina's heart ached as Brian looked away, shoulders sinking beneath invisible weight. Brian, she whispered. He lifted his head, eyes tired but resolute. We won't give up, he said softly. God's calling doesn't disappear because people fail. His words warmed her chest, but fear still curled around her like cold smoke. Elias sat heavily on the couch. I only came because I couldn't live with the guilt anymore, and because, his voice dropped, because Luther said he was coming for you next. Davina felt her breath hitch. Me? Brian whispered. Elias nodded. Yes, he believes you're the only one who can expose him. And he hates that. Brian went still, too still.
Davina felt dread coil inside her. Brian? He looked at her and she saw it. The moment he realized that danger wasn't just aimed at him, it was aimed at everyone he cared about. Brian inhaled deeply, grounding himself. Elias, he said, there must be documents, logs, something that proves I wasn't involved, something you can show the council. Elias hesitated. There were logs, he whispered. Davina stiffened. Were? Brian stepped closer. What do you mean, were? Elias's eyes filled with despair. 2 nights ago, Luther broke into the records room. Davina gasped. He erased everything, all the evidence that could have cleared you, and he replaced them with forged entries, ones that point directly to you. Bryant's breath left him in a slow exhale, a man learning just how deep the pit beneath him truly was. Davina grabbed his hand.
"He can't win," she whispered. "God won't allow his lies to stand forever." Brian closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded. "I know." But his jaw tightened with a determination that frightened her, a determination she recognized as the beginning of a battle he wasn't sure he could win alone. "Elias," Brian said, "we need one thing, the truth." Elias nodded. "I'm ready to tell everything to the council." Brian placed a steadying hand on Elias's shoulder. "It won't be easy." "I know," Elias said, "but God didn't give me this position to stay silent when it matters." For the first time that night, Davina saw hope. Small, fragile, but real. A sudden thump against the side of the house jolted all three of them. Davina's heart leapt into her throat. Brian turned immediately toward the window, scanning the darkness. Elias trembled violently. "He's here." Another thump. Then the faintest scrape, like fingers dragging across the wood. Brian stepped toward the window slowly. Too slowly. Davina grabbed his arm. "Brian, don't." He gently removed her hand. "I need to see." He reached the window, peeled back the curtain, and froze. Davina's voice trembled. "What do you see?" Brian didn't blink. He didn't breathe. And when he finally spoke, his voice was hollow with shock. "Footprints," he whispered. Davina's stomach clenched. "Footprints?" she breathed. Brian nodded. "They lead around the house. Fresh. Deep. Someone just walked the entire perimeter." Elias sank to the floor. "He's marking you, studying you, testing you." Brian shut his eyes, tightening his jaw. "This is spiritual warfare, but he will not break us." Davina placed her hand over his heart, not to comfort him, but because she needed to feel it beating strong and steady. "We need to pray," she whispered. Brian covered her hand with his own, their fingers intertwined. Elias knelt beside them, hands clasped. They bowed their heads together. The words were soft, trembling, desperate, but they rose like fire in the darkness. The moment the prayer ended, something shifted in the house, the atmosphere easing, the fear retreating just slightly, but Davina's relief vanished when Brian straightened suddenly. Davina frowned. "What is it?" Brian's eyes were fixed on the floorboards near the front door. Something was laying there, a small, folded square piece of paper that hadn't been there before. Elias gasped. "No, he didn't." Brian slowly picked it up, unfolded it. Davina watched his face cloud with a dread she had never seen in him, not even during the worst nights of ministry struggle. "Brian," she whispered. He turned the paper toward her. Just 6 words were scrawled across the page. 6 words that turned her blood to ice. "Tomorrow, Brian, the real truth begins." Davina's heart plummeted. But before she could speak, Brian lifted the paper again because there was a second line beneath it. A line written in darker ink. A line that made Elias collapse where he stood.
"And Davina will be the first." Davina's breath caught. Brian's face drained of color. Elias began to sob, and the house, quiet, dark, suffocating, felt suddenly too small to contain the terror that swept through them. Brian whispered her name, Davina, but before he could say another word, a soft knock echoed from the front door. 3 slow taps, deliberate, confident, waiting, and everything inside them turned cold. Chapter 3: The Knock That Shouldn't Exist. The knock echoed through Brian's home as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. 3 slow taps. Not frantic, not uncertain, calculated. Davina felt her pulse surge painfully, like her heart was trying to escape her chest.
She didn't dare breathe. She didn't dare blink. Elias clutched the edge of the sofa, face pale, lips trembling. He found us. He actually found us. Brian lifted a hand, signaling Davina and Elias to stay completely still. His posture shifted, quiet, steady, protective, the way he became whenever someone needed strength. But Davina could feel the strain beneath his calm. A second knock came, softer this time, almost mocking. Tap, tap, tap. The kind of knock from someone who wasn't afraid of being discovered, someone who wanted them to know he was there.
Davina's voice was barely a whisper.
"Brian, we shouldn't open the door." "I'm not opening it," he murmured back. "But I'm not letting fear decide what we do next." Elias scooted backward until his shoulders pressed against the wall. "Don't answer him. Don't even speak." Brian stepped closer to the door, stopping just before the peephole. He didn't look through it. He simply listened. The hallway outside was silent. Too silent. Davina felt a trembling inside her, not caused by fear alone, but by the spiritual chill that filled the room. Evil didn't need a face to make itself known. Sometimes its presence was enough. "Brian," she whispered, softer, "please be careful." He turned his head slightly, giving her a reassuring glance, but his eyes held a tension she had never seen in him. A heaviness that said he felt the danger pressing in on all sides. He placed his hand lightly on the door. Another knock came. Just one tap. Sharp, intentional. Brian flinched at the sound. Davina saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. Then a voice spoke from the other side of the door. Calm, low, unhurried. "Brian Robert, open the door." The sound melted Davina's legs. Her breath left her in a shaky exhale. Elias pressed both hands against his mouth, suppressing a cry. "That's him. That's Luther. That's his voice. He followed me. He followed me all the way here." Brian didn't move. The voice continued. "You have something that belongs to me." Davina's spine tingled. Something that belonged to him? Nothing of Luther's was here. Nothing except... Her eyes dropped to the folded note still lying on the table. The warning. The threat. The promise. Brian didn't answer. But Luther wasn't finished. "I know Elias is with you. I know he talked. I'm giving you the chance to control the damage before it destroys all of you." Elias shook his head violently, tears streaming. "No, no, 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 no. He told me he'd do this. He warned me." Davina moved toward him, kneeling and placing a steady hand on his trembling arm. "You did the right thing, Elias. Truth is never wrong, even when it feels dangerous." He looked at her with terrified eyes. "He won't stop now. He won't forgive me for exposing him." Brian lifted his head again. Davina saw it. The shift in demeanor, the spark of spiritual boldness returning to him like a flame catching fresh air. He stepped closer to the door, still not touching the handle. "You will not intimidate us," Brian said, calm, but cutting through the silence like a blade. Luther chuckled, a chilling, quiet sound. "You're bold tonight, Brian. We'll see how bold you remain tomorrow." Davina's stomach turned. Tomorrow, the same word written on the note. Tomorrow was the day Brian was to report to the Mission Council. Tomorrow was the day the investigation would begin. Tomorrow was when his life could be destroyed or redeemed. But Luther wasn't finished. "And tell Davina," the voice added softly, "that I look forward to meeting her." Davina's breath stopped. Her heart hammered painfully. Brian's entire body stiffened. "Leave her out of this," he growled, voice low and shaking with restrained fury. But the voice on the other side of the door remained calm, too calm. "You brought her into this when you let her stay tonight."
Another silence, long, suffocating. Then footsteps, slow, unhurried, walking away. Davina released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Elias sagged onto the floor, burying his face in his hands. Brian waited 10 long seconds before stepping back from the door. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He simply stood there, gripping the note so tightly the edges bent under his fingers. Davina approached him slowly, placing a trembling hand on his arm. "Brian, he knows my name." Brian turned toward her, pain written across his features. "He doesn't just know your name," Brian murmured. "He wants to use you to manipulate me." She swallowed. "But why me? I'm not involved with the council, or the funds, or the mission accounts." "That's why," Brian whispered, "because your name has nothing to do with the investigation. If something happens to you, it puts all the blame on me." Davina felt the truth sink like a stone in her chest. The threat wasn't random. Luther had plans, calculated plans. Elias finally found his voice. "Brian, he won't stop. You need protection. Davina needs protection. He's not afraid of anything." Brian closed his eyes briefly as though seeking inner stillness. He should be afraid of the truth. But when he opened them again, Davina saw the fear hiding underneath his strength. The fear wasn't for himself. It was for her. The minutes after Luther walked away felt like an hour wrapped in ice. Brian checked the windows, making sure each was locked. Davina couldn't blame him. She would have done the same if she could steady her hands long enough. Elias remained curled into a corner of the living room, knees pulled his chest, shaking. Davina sat beside him, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "It isn't your fault," she said quietly. "None of this is." His voice broke. "You don't understand. I knew Luther was dangerous. I knew he had access to things he shouldn't, and I still tried to handle it alone." Davina shook her head. "You were scared. Anyone would have been." But Elias turned his hollow eyes toward Brian. "I've ruined your life, your ministry, your reputation, everything you've built, everything God used you for. And now he's coming for Davina too." Brian walked over, kneeling in front of Elias. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You didn't ruin anything. Someone evil made choices, not you. But my silence, your silence is over now. And that's what matters." Davina saw Elias's shoulders tremble again, but this time with something like relief. Brian reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Elias's eyes widened. "You still have the copies?" Elias whispered. Brian nodded. "I made copies of every legitimate document months ago when I first noticed little inconsistencies, before I even knew there was a bigger problem." Elias gasped. "Brian, why didn't you say anything?" Brian gave a small, tired smile. "Because I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to accuse anyone without proof." Davina felt awe ripple through her. Brian had been fighting quietly long before anyone else understood the battle, long before the danger surfaced. He carried burdens in silence, not for lack of trust, but out of a desire to protect others. But even with these, we still need the original digital logs to back them up. Without them, the council may believe the forged ones. Elias lowered his head. "And those recordings no longer exist." Davina looked between them. "Is there any way to recover them?" Elias hesitated. "Maybe, but it would require something dangerous." Ryan leaned forward. "Dangerous how?" Elias swallowed hard. "The digital logs aren't stored on the mission's local computer. They're stored in a secure archive. To access them, you need physical clearance and a secondary code." Davina frowned. "Then someone else should access them. Someone the council trusts." Elias had nodded. "Brian is the only one who had legitimate clearance.
which means if anyone tries to access the archive under his authorization, it'll look like he's trying to alter the evidence. Brian inhaled sharply. So if I try to prove my innocence, it will look like I'm guilty. Elias nodded. That truth weighed heavily on all three of them. Davina stood slowly, pacing the room. Her heartbeat throbbed in her ears. There had to be a way out. There had to. But before she found words, Brian spoke again, softer this time, pained. Davina, he said, turning toward her, you shouldn't stay here tonight. Elias nodded in agreement, almost frantically. Luther knows your name. He knows where you are. You should go somewhere safe. Davina shook her head immediately, fiercely. No, I'm not leaving. Davina, Brian said gently, but with that authoritative edge she rarely heard. He targeted you directly. I can't risk. She stepped toward him. No, she repeated softly, but with unshakable resolution. You don't fight a battle like this apart. You fight it together. Her voice trembled only slightly at the end. Brian stared at her for a moment, something raw flickering in his eyes, something beyond fear, beyond worry, a tenderness, a longing, a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. Davina, but she shook her head again. I'm not leaving you. His breath shuddered. Somewhere behind them, Elias quietly wiped his eyes, witnessing a moment that neither Davina nor Brian fully noticed. Davina, Brian murmured, voice breaking just slightly, if anything happened to you because of me. She stepped closer until barely a hand's breadth separated them. Nothing will, she said. Not if we stand firm. Not if we trust God. And not if we refuse to let fear break us. Brian exhaled shakily, closing his eyes for a moment as if breathing her strength into himself. When he opened them, something had shifted. Resolution, courage, and something deeper. Something he wasn't ready to name yet. But the moment was interrupted by the shrill ring of Brian's phone. All froze. Brian's gaze darted to the screen. Davina felt her pulse spike again. Who is it? She whispered. Brian didn't answer at first. He simply stared. Then, finally, in a voice barely audible, he said, It's a member of the Mission Council. Elias stiffened. At this hour? Why would they call now? Brian swallowed. Davina stepped closer. Brian, answer it. He hesitated, then pressed his thumb to the screen. Hello? A voice crackled through the line. Deep, stern, authoritative. Brian Robert, you are expected at the council hall tonight, not tomorrow. Brian froze. Davina's breath caught. Elias shook his head violently, whispering frantically, No, this isn't the council. They would never summon someone at night. It's him. It's him pretending. But the voice continued. And, Brian, come alone. Davina's heart stopped. Bring no one with you, the voice added, colder now. No one at all. Brian slowly lowered the phone from his ear. Davina waited, feared, prayed. What did he say? She whispered. Brian lifted his eyes, filled with dread, and he spoke the words that made the room tilt. He said, if I don't come within the hour, he will come back. A pause. And this time, he won't knock.
Chapter 4. When the Truth Trembles. The moon had risen by the time Brian and Davina reached the outer edge of Roseville, where the old footpath curled around the ridge like a silver thread. They walked without speaking for several minutes, the night air cool enough to sting, but soft enough to feel like a quiet invitation. Something heavy hung between them. The weight of what Elias had revealed, the dread of the anonymous accusation, and the echo of the messenger's summons. Davina kept glancing at Brian. He had always walked with a certain steadiness, a kind of quiet authority. But tonight, something was different. His steps dragged, his shoulders bent beneath an invisible burden.
Every now and then, he pressed a hand to his forehead, as if trying to force clarity into a storm that refused to settle. "Brian," she finally whispered, "say something." He stopped walking and faced her. "I don't know what to say. Every time I think I've found the thread, something else unravels." Davina reached for his hand. "Then don't look for the thread. Just talk to me." He exhaled shakily, eyes lowered to their joined hands. "Someone used my authorization code. Someone wanted the transfer to look like I did it. That's not just an accusation, it's a setup." "And Elias?" Davina asked softly. "He's hiding something. Something big." "He did tell you the transfer started before the fire," she reminded. "Yes, but he didn't tell us why, or who else is involved." A muscle in Brian's jaw tightened. "And now someone dangerous knows? Someone looking for me?" Davina's grip tightened around his hand. "You're not facing this alone." He closed his eyes. Her words, simple as they were, seemed to dig straight into the hollow fear he'd been trying to ignore. When he opened them again, there was fire behind them, wounded, shaken, but real. "Davina, how are you so calm?" "I'm not." She gave a quiet, trembling laugh. "My heart is racing so fast I can hear it in my ears. But I know one thing. God is not confused, and you're not the villain here." He looked away, swallowing hard. "I wish the Mission Council could see it like that." "They will, because we're going to find the truth." There was a pause, brief, fragile, but full. Then Brian squeezed her hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying." She smiled softly. "I told you, fire didn't break us. This won't either." He stopped walking. She turned to face him, the moonlight washing over both of them. Something quiet and tender settled between them, something neither of them dared to name too quickly. But it was there, in the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, in the way her breath caught when his hand brushed hers. "Davina?" She lifted her head. "Yes?" His lips parted as though he was about to say something dangerous, something honest, something he had held inside for too long. But the moment shattered when a dry branch snapped behind them. They spun toward the sound. The pack was empty. Yet Davina felt it, the distinct sensation of eyes watching from somewhere in the darkness. "Bryant," she whispered, inching closer. He placed a hand behind her gently, guiding her behind him. "Someone's there." Another crack, louder, then silence. Bryant scanned the ridge, breath low and controlled. "Show yourself." Only the wind answered. After a moment of tense stillness, he lowered his voice. "Let's go back. It's too open here." They turned and continued down the path, but neither spoke. Something had shifted. The night felt tighter, the shadows darker. And that sensation that they were not alone refused to leave them. Brian barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, Elias's words replayed. "The missing funds. They were transferred using your authorization code." By sunrise, he felt wrung out, but a heart resolve settled inside him. He needed answers. He needed Elias. Davina met him outside the community hall, her hair pulled back and her eyes alert despite the tiredness she tried to hide. "You didn't sleep either," Brian murmured. "Did you think I would?" she asked softly. He managed a tight smile. "Ready?" She nodded. Together they walked to the storage building where Elias worked. The air smelled faintly of metal and old paper, and the gravel crunched under their feet. The door was slightly ajar. "Elias," Brian called as he pushed it open. The room was dim, lit only by the morning bleed of sunlight. Stacks of old supplied logs and folded inventory sheets cluttered the shelves. A half-packed crate sat on the table. But Elias was nowhere to be found. Davina frowned. He said he'd be here early today. Bryant walked deeper into the room. Elias? He repeated, and that's when he saw it. On the desk lay a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was Elias's, hurried, uneven, almost shaky. Bryant picked it up. Davina stepped beside him. What is it? He read aloud, voice tightening as he spoke. Bryant, I found something last night. Something I wasn't supposed to see. I think I know who's behind the transfers, but they're watching me. If I don't return by evening, don't look for me in Roseville. I'm gonna get proof. Pray for me. E. Davina's breath caught. He went alone? Bryant clenched the note. And someone's watching him. And me. Davina moved closer. Bryant, we need to tell someone. You can't keep this to yourself. Who can I trust? He whispered.
The council already thinks I'm guilty. Someone within the mission reported me anonymously. Someone forged my authorization code. Someone dangerous wants me silenced. Davina swallowed. Then we pray. He nodded slowly, but the storm in his eyes didn't ease. We pray and we act. He searched the room again, but something else caught Davina's attention. A torn piece of paper sticking out from under the crate. She bent down and pulled it free. Brian, look.
It was a page from one of the mission's supply logs, except sections had been blacked out. Not scratched or crossed, blacked. Thick ink strugs covering numbers, signatures, and dates. She held it up. Why would Elias hide something like this? Brian didn't answer because something else hit him with sudden clarity. He recognized the ink. It matched the ink from the anonymous report sent to the mission office. The same shade, the same heavy strokes, the same pressure marks. This wasn't just coincidence. Someone was hiding financial manipulations and using the same ink to report him. Davina sensed his realization. Bryant, what is it? He turned to her, voice low. Whoever forged my authorization code also sent the report. Davina's eyes widened. So the person who covered up these records is the same person trying to destroy you? Yes, Brian whispered. And Elias figured it out. Davina's fear sharpened. Bryant, Elias is missing. Bryant looked at the note again, jaw tightening. He said not to look for him in Roseville. If he found proof, he must have gone somewhere with records older than these. Where? Davina whispered. Only one place. He stepped toward the door, the abandoned North District facility. Davina's face felt pale. Bryant, that place has been empty for years. But the old financial archives weren't moved when it was shut down. If someone wanted to hide a paper trail, they'd go there. Davina's heart thudded. Bryant, then Elias went there because the proof is still inside. Bryant nodded. And if the person responsible followed him?
Fear burned in Davina's stomach. But Bryant, you can't go alone. He turned to her, eyes dark with determination. I'm not letting you go there. I'm not letting you go without me, she countered. Not when someone is looking for you. Silence fell, charged and painful. He opened his mouth to protest, and she stepped closer. You told me last night I didn't have to stay, she whispered. I'm choosing to. His jaw flexed. He stared at her, really stared, and something in him yielded. Something soft, raw, and unguarded. All right, he whispered. We'll go together. The sky had turned gray by the time they reached the outskirts of Roseville. Tall, twisted trees surrounded the old building, and the rusted sign hung crookedly, swaying in the wind. The facility looked abandoned. Doors broken, windows cracked,
shadows stretching long across the courtyard. "This feels wrong," Defina murmured. Brian touched her arm gently. "Stay close." They stepped inside. Dust coated everything. Old metal shelves lay toppled. Papers were scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and silence. "Elias?" Brian called. His voice echoed through the empty hall. No response. They searched room after room, moving deeper into the old structure. Tafina kept glancing behind them, feeling watched, though she couldn't explain why. In the main archive room, they found rows of old storage boxes. Many were ripped open. Some were missing entirely. Others had been burned. "Someone's been here," Brian whispered. Tafina knelt by one of the boxes. "Brian, look at this." Inside the box lay a stack of documents, and on the top page, numbers were circled in red ink. Not black, red. Elias's handwriting. Brian ticked the page. "These are supply fund transfers, dating back months before the fire." Defina's eyes widened. So Elias was trying to trace it. "Yes," Brian murmured. "And he found something." He flipped the page over. More circled numbers, more notes, but one line stood out, circled 3 times. Authorization code BR9A17. Defina's stomach twisted. That's yours." "Yes," Brian whispered. "Used long before I ever accessed these accounts." Tafina covered her mouth. "Brian, someone has been using your code for months, and Elias was close to proving it." They shared a heavy glance. Then footsteps. Somewhere down the hall. Slow, heavy, measured. Tafina's breath caught. "Brian." He motioned for silence. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Brian grabbed her hand. "Hide." He pulled her behind a fallen shelf, crouching low behind the metal frame. The footsteps stopped just outside the archive room. A shadow stretched across the doorway. Tafina's heartbeat thudded painfully in her chest. She leaned closer to Brian without realizing it, and he wrapped an arm protectively around her shoulders. They held their breath. A voice, low, unfamiliar, chilling, drifted into the room. "I know you're here." Tafina froze. Brian's grip tightened. Another step inside, the silhouette grew larger against the wall. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said. The sound of metal sliding. A weapon being drawn. Tafina's breath hitched. But then, from the far end of the hall, a second voice shouted, "Stop!" It was strained, weak, but unmistakable.
"Elias!"
Brian shot up instinctively, and the moment he did, the dark figure lunged toward the shelves. Metal clattered. Dust exploded. Tafina screamed Brian's name. The shadowed man grabbed something off the floor, something that gleamed, and bolted out the opposite door. Brian sprinted after him. "Brian, no!" Tafina cried, scrambling to her feet. But he didn't stop. He raced down the splitting hallway, chasing the man who had just tried to silence them. The man who held proof, or danger, or both. Tafina ran after him, Elias's weakened voice echoing faintly behind her. "Tafina, don't let him." The hallway forked left and right. Brian chose left. Tafina followed, and then she skidded to a halt. The hallway was empty. Brian was gone. Completely gone. "Brian," she called, breath shaking. "Brian." Her voice echoed into the emptiness. Silence answered, and the chilling realization struck her. Brian wasn't missing by accident. Someone had been waiting for him. The walls felt too close, the air too thin. She took a trembling step back. "Brian, please answer me." But the hall stayed silent. Brian Robert had vanished into the shadows, taken by a man who wanted him silenced. And this time, Tafina had no idea how to save him.
Chapter 5. When the darkness takes someone you love. Davina had never known silence could be so loud. It pressed into her ears, filled her chest,
and wrapped around her spine as she stood frozen in the dim hallway of the abandoned facility. The air smelled of rust and old dust, but beneath that, something colder. Fear. Real fear. Fear for Brian. Fear for Elias. Fear for whatever hand had been moving the shadows in Roseville long before either of them realized. Brian, she whispered again. Nothing, only her voice echoing back to her, thin and fragile. Her heart hammered painfully, each beat like a fist against her ribs. She turned in a frantic circle, searching for any sign, footprints, a door ajar, a movement in the shadows. But the hallway stretched empty, its cracked tiles glowing faintly under the thin sunlight leaking through broken windows. God, please, she breathed, please help me find him. Her voice trembled, and for the first time since all of this began, she felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel. Helplessness. True, trembling helplessness. Because Brian wasn't just missing, he had been taken. Taken by someone who knew these abandoned corridors well enough to disappear without a sound. Someone who wanted to destroy him. Someone who might be willing to do far worse. Davina swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic. She wasn't going to fall apart. Not now. Not when Brian needed her. She turned sharply and sprinted back down the hallway towards Elias's voice. When she reached the archive room again, Elias was slumped against the wall, a hand pressed to his side, his breathing uneven. Sweat beaded his forehead. His shirt was torn, dust smeared across his arms and shoulders. Elias, Davina hurried to him. You're hurt. Not badly, he rasped, just winded. But he shook his head, wincing. I'm fine. Just help me sit up. She slid her arms under his and helped him settle into a better position. Up close, she realized how exhausted he looked, not just physically alone, but spiritually. Like a man who'd been running from the truth for months and the weight of it had finally crushed him. Davina studied him. Elias, what happened? Who was that man? Elias closed his eyes. Someone who doesn't want Brian cleared. Someone who doesn't want the truth to come out. That isn't enough, Davina said, voice trembling. Where is Brian? Did you see where he took him? He swallowed painfully. No, I only heard them. Then everything went silent. Davina sat back on her heels, despair thickening around her. She felt the edges of panic claw at her again, threatening to swallow her whole, but she pushed it back down. No, she whispered fiercely, we're not doing this. We're not giving up. We need to find him. Elias opened his eyes slowly. Davina. No, she insisted. Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me we should wait. Someone took him. Someone who has been watching all of this. Yes, Elias murmured. They've been watching for a long time. Davina stiffened. What do you mean? He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. There's something I didn't tell you. Something I didn't tell Brian. I should have, but I was afraid. Davina's stomach tightened. Elias, tell me now. He hesitated, and the hesitation filled the room like smoke. He whispered, I think I know who's behind all of this, and I think he's been planning it for longer than you realize. Davina's pulse spiked. Who? Before he could answer, a loud metallic crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Davina jolted, eyes wide. Elias tensed. They're still here. We need to go, she whispered. Now. Elias nodded weakly. Help me up. She got him to his feet, his arms slung over her shoulder. The moment felt surreal. 2 hunted people limping through an abandoned building while the man they cared most about was somewhere in the dark, taken by someone they didn't understand. Elias, she said urgently as they moved, tell me who it is. His voice was a ghost of a whisper. His name is... Another crash. Davina flinched. Elias stopped mid-sentence. They waited, listened. Nothing. Davina tightened her grip on his arm. Come on, we have to get outside. They hurried down the hall, turning corners, dodging fallen beams and broken tiles. Every step felt like moving through a nightmare. And all the while, one thought pulsed through Davina's mind, like a bar heartbeat. Please, God, don't let him be hurt. Don't let this be the end. The sunlight felt almost violent when they burst through the broken doorway. Davina blinked rapidly, half dragging Elias to the tree line. They needed to hide, to breathe, to think. Elias collapsed against a large rock, catching his breath. Davina crouched in front of him. Elias, please, tell me the truth. Who was behind this? He ran a shaking hand over his face. It started months before the fire. Transfers from the supply front. Always small, always disguised. At first, I thought it was an error. Then I realized it wasn't. Davina listened, her heart pounding. I told myself it was a mistake, that it would sort itself out. But the numbers kept changing. Then I found the authorization code, Brian's code, used multiple times. Davina pressed. Brian didn't do those transfers. I know. I knew it then. I just didn't know who did. Who? Davina whispered again. He looked at her, face pale, eyes haunted. A man named Gabriel Steele. Davina frowned. I don't know that name. You wouldn't, Elias said. He never appears publicly, but he used to work with the mission's administrative board years ago. He handled their systems, their authorizations, the digital transitions. He had access to everything. Davina's chest tightened. And he's the one trying to destroy Brian? He's the one who forged the code, Elias said, and he's the one who sent the anonymous reports. The realization hit Davina like falling stone. So he's been framing Brian. Yes, Elias broke. And when I started digging, really digging, he found out. And that's why someone dangerous was watching you? Elias nodded, swallowing hard. Gabriel has been living under the surface for years, moving funds, manipulating accounts, covering his trail. He's smart, Davina, too smart. And now, he knows Brian was close to exposing him. Davina's breath hitched, so he took Brian. Yes, Elias whispered, because Brian is the only one with the integrity and clarity to prove what Gabriel has done. Davina's eyes failed, but she blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. Then we have to get him back. We'll try to. But, Davina, no. She shook her head fiercely. No warnings, no giving up. God didn't bring us this far to let evil win. Elias stared at her quietly, almost in awe. Brian always said your faith was different, stronger than most. It's all I have right now, she whispered. They managed to get back to Roseville by midday. Elias limped beside her, leaning heavily on a stick he'd found on the counter. Davina kept checking over her shoulder. She felt watched. She felt followed. Every rustling in the trees made her jump. When she reached the town center, a few people called out greetings, but she barely heard them. Her mind replayed the moment Brian disappeared, over and over. The way he had run after danger without hesitation, the way he had been pulled into the shadows like a whisper swallowed by darkness. Her heart twisted painfully. Davina, Elias whispered as they reached her house, we need to go inside. I need to show you something. She unlocked the door shakily and helped him inside. He lowered himself onto the couch, grimacing. What is it? She asked urgently. What did you find? Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. This, he said quietly, is what I risked everything to get. It's what Gabriel was looking for when he came after me. Davina stared at it. What's on it? Records, Elias whispered. Proof, not just of the transfers, but of who made them and how. Davina's eyes widened. This could clear Brian. Yes, Elias said, but only if we can get it to the right hands. Davina reached for the drive, but Elias stopped her. Davina, No, he said softly. There's something else you need to know. She stiffened. What is it? Elias hesitated, and the hesitation filled the room like smoke. Finally, he whispered, Gabriel didn't just forge Brian's authorization code, he cloned it. Davina's eyes widened. That means, Elias continued, he can use Brian's identity anytime he wants, anywhere, and no one will know the difference. Davina felt the blood drain from her face, so Gabriel isn't just framing Brian.
No, Elias said. He is becoming him. The room spun. And if Gabriel has Brian, Elias's voice broke. He may force him to confess, or worse. Davina closed her eyes, fighting tears. No, God won't allow that. He won't. Elias didn't argue. He didn't have to, because deep down, beneath Davina's fierce faith, a cold dread had begun to bloom. What if Gabriel didn't need Brian alive? What if he only needed his identity? Hours passed. They waited for news, for a sign, for anything. But nothing came. Davina paced the room, unable to sit, unable to breathe properly. Every corner of the house felt small. Every minute felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Elias tried to rest, but his eyes kept fluttering open, haunted and restless. Davina finally stopped pacing. I'm going after him. Elias jerked upright. Davina, no, you can't. I can't sit here doing nothing, she said, voice trembling. Brian is somewhere out there, alone, scared, and being hunted by someone who hates him. You don't know where to look, Elias insisted. I'll start with the North District again, then the woods, then... No, Elias said sharply, grabbing her wrist. Davina, listen to me. Gabriel still is dangerous. So is doing nothing, she whispered. Her eyes burned with raw emotion, fear, and love, tangled so tightly. She could no longer separate them. You don't understand. Brian, he means... Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. Elias softened. You love him. Davina's breath hitched. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Elias shook his head gently. Davina, if you walk out there alone, Gabriel will find you instead. He'll use you to get to Brian, or to silence the truth. She swallowed. Then... what do I do? Elias looked down at the flash drive in his hand. We find someone who can help. Someone Gabriel can't intimidate. Who? Davina whispered. Elias hesitated. There's a man who used to investigate internal fraud cases in the Mission Network. He retired years ago, but he owes me a favor. Where is he? Not in Roseville, but close enough. Davina nodded slowly. Then... we go to him. Elias exhaled. Relief, hope, maybe a little fear. We go at first light. Davina opened her mouth to argue. She didn't want to wait another minute, but exhaustion weighed down her shoulders. She sank onto a chair. Elias leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes. For a few moments, silence settled between them again, but it was broken when Davina whispered into the stillness. Brian, wherever you are, hold on. I'm coming. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Davina sat by the window long after Elias fell asleep, staring out into the dark. The moon hung low, crowds drifting across it like shadows fleeing something unseen. Her heart felt battered, torn open. She had seen Brian face hardships. She had seen him tired, discouraged, even afraid. But she had never seen him look like he did when the shadowed man stepped into that hallway. He didn't look terrified. He looked resigned, like he knew someone was coming for him, like he expected it. Davina's chest tightened painfully. God, I don't know what you're doing, but please protect him. Her voice broke. A tear slipped down her cheek. Don't let this be the story where I lose him. She pressed her forehead against the cool window glass. Don't let this be the moment everything ends. Outside, the wind shifted. Leaves rustled. A branch snapped. Davina straightened slowly, her breath catching. Another sound. A footstep. Then a shadow moves past the window. Her blood turned cold.
She stood up slowly, careful not to wake Elias. Her hand drifted toward the lamp, something she could use as a weapon if she had to. Another footstep, closer. Then a shadow fell across her front door. Her heart pounded. A soft, deliberate knock echoed through the house. Not hurried, not frightened, not friendly. Slow, measured, purposeful. Davina Moore, a voice deep, calm, chilling, spoke through the door. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Davina froze. Her breath stopped. Elias jolted upright on the sofa, eyes wide. The voice continued. If you want Brian Robert back, open the door. Davina's knees weakened. Elias shook his head violently. Davina, no, don't! But her hand had already drifted toward the doorknob because the man outside had said the one sentence she could not ignore, the one thing that ripped through her fear like lightning. If you want Brian back. Her fingers touched the lock. Her breath trembled. Her heart thundered. And slowly, ever so slowly, she turned the handle.
Chapter 6. The door you should never open. The doorknob felt cold beneath Davina's trembling fingers. Too cold, like metal left out under a midwinter moon. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. The silence behind her was heavy, thick with Elias's shock and fear. Davina, Elias rasped. Don't. Please don't. But it was already too late. The lock clicked softly, a tiny sound, but in the dark hush of the house, it seemed to boom like thunder. Davina pulled the door open. A rush of night air swept inside, chilling her skin. For a moment, she saw nothing, just the muted glow of the street lamp and the stretching darkness beyond it. Then a silhouette shifted forward. A tall figure, broad shoulders, hands folded behind him in a manner that felt too calm, too controlled. Gabriel Steele. He stepped into the faint light, revealing sharp, angular features, eyes like cold iron, intense, observing, utterly unreadable. Good evening, Miss Moore, he said with the softness that didn't match the ice beneath it. I appreciate your cooperation. Diva's throat tightened. She said nothing. Behind her, Elias struggled to stand. Davina, he whispered urgently. Step back. Close the door. Now. Gabriel's eyes flicked past her, settling on Elias. Ah, he murmured. I thought I recognized that voice. Elias. His gaze hardened. You look worse for wear. Elias straightened as much as he could. You won't take her. Gabriel smiled faintly, and the emptiness in that smile made Davina's stomach knot. I already have. She opened the door. Davina found her voice. Where's Brian? Gabriel's expression barely shifted. Alive. She exhaled shakily, a sob almost escaping her. For now. The breath froze in her lungs. Elias stepped forward. Gabriel, whatever this is, it ends now. Let her go. Let him go. You don't have to. Gabriel silenced him with a raised hand. What I have to do, Elias, is complete the work I started. His eyes sharpened. You should have stayed out of my system logs. You were never good at hiding your tracks. Elias stiffened. Gabriel's eyes returned to Davina. You have something that belongs to me. Davina swallowed hard. The flash drive. Good. He clasped his hands behind his back again. Then you understand why I'm here. No, she said firmly, surprising herself with her own courage. I understand you forged Brian's authorization code. I understand you've been stealing from the mission for years. And I understand you're scared. Scared enough to hide, scared not to hunt people who tell the truth. Gabriel's jaw tightened. The first crack in his facade. You think you're brave.
But bravery without wisdom is just another form of suicide. Davina didn't move. "Where is Brian?" she whispered. Gabriel continued to study her, as though measuring how far her faith could bend before breaking. "Alive," he repeated, "and I intend to keep him that way, provided you cooperate." Elias pushed through another wave of pain. "Davina, don't trust him. He'll kill you both." Gabriel's eyes hardened. "You were a loyal treasurer once, Elias. It's unfortunate what fear does to a man. And it's unfortunate what evil does." Davina snapped before she could stop herself. Gabriel's gaze slowly slid back to her. "Give me the drive." Davina's fingers curled at her sides. "If I give it to you, you'll kill Brian." Gabriel's head tilted. "I didn't say that. You didn't deny it." Silence thickened. Then Gabriel exhaled and took one measured step forward. "Miss Moore, I have no desire to kill Brian Robert." Davina's heart squeezed. "I need him." The words were ice. "For what?" Elias demanded. Gabriel didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave a small smile, chilling in its gentleness. "Walk with me." Davina stiffened. "I'm not going anywhere with you." Gabriel glanced past her again. "If you want Brian Robert alive, yes, you will." Elias limped another step closer. "You touch her, Gabriel, and—" Gabriel moved in one swift, startling moment. His hand snapped forward, seizing Elias by the shirt collar. Davina grasped as Elias cried out, but Gabriel didn't strike him. He only leaned in, voice low and controlled. "You should have destroyed that drive when you found it. Instead, you ran. That was your second mistake." "What was the first?" Elias croaked. Gabriel released him abruptly, letting him collapse back onto the sofa. Davina reached for Elias instinctively, but Gabriel's hand closed around her upper arm. "Walk." "Don't touch her," Elias shouted. Gabriel's grip tightened. Davina's breath trembled, but she didn't fight. She couldn't, not with Bryant's life hanging between every second. "We're not leaving the house," she said firmly. Gabriel thought. He considered her words, then nodded once. "Very well. We'll talk inside." Elias' eyes widened. No, Davina, don't let him." But Gabriel was already guiding her back, closing the door behind them with a soft click that felt heavier than a slammed gate. Gabriel released her arm. His eyes drifted around her living room, taking in every detail, not with curiosity but calculation. Nice home. Quiet. Secluded. Convenient. "For what?" she whispered. "For conversation." Elias forced himself upright. "She's not alone, Gabriel. Whatever you want from her, you'll have to go through me." Gabriel's gaze flicked toward him with faint amusement. "I already did." Davina stepped between them, heart pounding. "Gabriel, what do you want with Brian?" Gabriel's expression changed, not softening, but settling into something cold, contemplative. "Brian," he repeated quietly. "Brian Robert is in possession of something I need. Something he doesn't even realize he has." Davina's brows knitted. "What do you mean?" "The key," he simply said. Elias's face went pale. "You're still chasing that?" he whispered. Gabriel's eyes darkened. "I never stopped." Davina frowned. "What key?" Gabriel didn't answer immediately. He walked slowly around the room, fingertips brushing lightly over a bookshelf, the curtain hem, the back of a chair. He was studying the space the way a wolf studies possible escape routes. Then he turned back to her. "There was information hidden in the mission's old database archives. Information that could end me, and end a great deal more than me." Davina stiffened. but no one can access it. Gabriel continued. Except a handful of men who once worked on the system's earliest transitions, men who are now gone. He paused. Except one. The Venus Brett stopped. Brian. Gabriel nodded once. His name is embedded in the system's oldest authorization matrix, a legacy credential. I thought it had been deactivated long ago. His jaw clenched, but it wasn't. Elias whispered, That means he... Yes, Gabriel said. He is one of the last people on Earth who can unlock what I need. Davina felt the room tilt. Brian didn't even know. Gabriel stepped closer. He will give me that access. His voice hardened. And you, Miss Moore, will ensure he does. Davina stared at him, horror clawing at her. I would never help you if you hurt him. I don't intend to hurt him, Gabriel said calmly. But if he resists, I will be forced to reconsider. Davina's heart jolted. What do you want me to do? To come with me, Gabriel said softly. To persuade him. He listens to you. He trusts you. Perhaps even more than he trusts himself. Davina swallowed hard and chest tight. And if I refuse? Gabriel's eyes locked onto hers, cold and unwavering. Then Brian Robert dies. Elias pushed himself forward. Gabriel, stop this. You're losing control. If you do this, there is no turning back. Gabriel's expression didn't change. There was no path to turn back to. Davina found her courage rising again, shaky but real. If I come with you, will you let Elias go? Will you promise not to hurt him? Gabriel considered this, then nodded once. He is irrelevant.
My interest lies only with you and Brian. Elias's voice went raw. Davina, you can't trust him. He'll take you both and... Davina turned to him, tears burning her eyes. If Brian is alive, I have to go. No! Elias shook his head violently. Davina, listen to me. You don't know what you're walking into. Gabriel Steele is not a man you go with. He's a man you run from. Gabriel sighed. We're wasting time. Davina lifted her chin. Where is Brian now? Gabriel's eyes flickered, not with emotion, but calculation. I will show you. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small and metallic. A remote. He pressed the button. A soft beep echoed. Then a sound crackled to life. A speaker within the device. Davina froze because she heard breathing. Shaky. Pained. Familiar. Then, Davina, her heart shattered. Brian! Gabriel turned off the feed. That, he said, tucking the remote away, was recorded an hour ago. Davina felt weak with relief and terror all at once. He's alive. Oh God, he's alive. Yes, Gabriel said. For now. Elias clenched the sofa arm. Davina, don't go. Gabriel extended a hand toward her. Choose. Davina stared at that hand. Her whole world seemed to tighten around her. The walls, the air, her own heartbeat. Brian needed her. God, help me. Help me do the right thing. She looked at Elias, broken, terrified, helpless, and whispered, I'm sorry. And she placed her hand in Gabriel Steele's. His fingers closed around hers with a quiet finality. Very well, he said. We leave now. Elias sounded like he was breaking. Davina, no, don't. Gabriel stopped in the doorway. pulling Davina gently but firmly with him. Then he turned his head slightly, addressing Elias without looking back. "Oh," he said softly, almost as an afterthought. "And Elias?" Elias blinked, trembling. Gabriel's voice dropped lower, calm, certain, deadly. "You shouldn't have left your window open." Elias froze. "What?" A rustle sounded in the back of the house. A shadow shifted, and a second man, the same one who attacked Elias earlier, stepped into view, blocking the hallway. Elias's face drained of color. Davina gasped. "No, Elias?" Gabriel tightened his grip on her hand. "Time to go, Miss Moore." "No!" she cried, trying to pull away. But Gabriel was stronger. The last thing she saw as the door slammed shut behind them was Elias, trapped, cornered, and the shadowed man stepping toward him with silent, predatory purpose. The night swallowed the house, and Davina realized with a sinking dread that walking out that door was the moment she became a hostage too. And Bryant had no idea she was coming. As Gabriel pulls Davina toward a waiting car, her phone vibrates in her pocket. A single unread message from an unknown number. Don't trust him. Brian isn't where he says. Chapter 7. The Passenger Seat. Davina had never felt more aware of her own breathing. Each inhale sounded too loud in the tight cabin of Gabriel's SUV. Each exhale threatened to betray her pounding heart. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap like a child, trying not to anger a parent. The cool leather beneath her palms did nothing to steady the heat pulsing through her veins. Her phone lay in her pocket like a living thing, burning, trembling, accusing. "He's not where you think. Don't trust the one driving you." The anonymous warning replayed over and over in her mind, sharp as broken glass. She didn't dare look at it again. Not while Gabriel's cold gray eyes flicked toward her every few seconds, as though he could sense her secrets pressing against her skin. The road stretched ahead in a long, lonely line, trees blurring past, the sun sinking in slow, dramatic strokes of golden red. It should have been beautiful. Tonight, it felt like the world was closing in around her. Gabriel hadn't spoken since they left Roseville's outskirts. His silence had weight, precision, control. Every movement he made behind the wheel was measured, unhurried, purposeful. He didn't need to threaten her aloud. His calm was the threat. Davina forced her face into neutrality. She'd practiced this for years, hiding fear behind gentleness, hiding confusion behind smiles, hiding a worry behind prayer. But this was different. This was survival. Her fingers twitched slightly against her leg. She curled them into fists and prayed Gabriel hadn't noticed. Her thoughts spiraled, wild as loose wire. If Brian isn't where Gabriel says he is, then who sent the message? Elias? Someone else? Someone worse. She swallowed hard, staring straight ahead, as though the answer lived in the road signs flying past. For a moment she imagined rolling down the window, throwing herself out onto the highway, running until her lungs burst. But she didn't move. Couldn't. Gabriel's presence wrapped around her like barbed wire. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You're very quiet." The softness of his voice made the hairs on Davina's arm stand up. She knew that softness. She'd heard it before, moments before Gabriel did something irreversible. She kept her tone steady, just thinking. "Oh," he glanced at her again, eyes unreadable. "About what?"
Ryan. It was the only answer safe enough to give. Gabriel hummed, low in his throat. You'll see him soon. Davina's stomach twisted. But first, he continued, you're going to prove your loyalty. They drove for another 10 minutes before Gabriel turned off onto a narrow dirt road. The tires groaned over gravel and broken sticks, each pop echoing like gunshots into Davina's chest. What little sunlight remained struggled to pierce the thick, towering trees surrounding them. Then, the warehouse appeared. A massive, windowless structure of corrugated metal, dull, rusted, forgotten by the world. Its presence felt wrong, like a place designed not to be found. Gabriel parked beside a set of heavy steel doors. He turned off the engine. The silence roared. When Gabriel opened his door, she hesitated, just long enough for him to know that. His hand curled around her arm, firm but deceptively gentle. Come, he said. There's something you need to see. Inside the warehouse was colder than she expected. The air smelled of dust and old machinery. Overhead, strip lights flickered to life in a harsh white blaze, illuminating rows of crates and abandoned equipment. But Gabriel led her toward a single corner of the bathroom, a desk, a set of monitors, a chair positioned dead center like some kind of twisted command station. Davina's part stuttered. One of the monitors was on, and on the screen, Brian, alive, bound, bruised, breathing. Her lungs filled with a sudden whoosh of relief so powerful it nearly sent her to her knees. She stepped closer to the monitor, reaching out as though the image might warm beneath her fingers. But then the doubts crept in. Cold, relentless, clever. Is this live? Or a recording? A loop? Manipulation? Gabriel watched her carefully. Too carefully. Davina forced her face into neutrality. He's alive. For now, Gabriel said. The words were ice water dumped over her spine. She turned slowly toward him. What do you want from me? What I asked for. Loyalty. He moved to the desk, opened the Zoller, and pulled out a phone. Brian's phone. She recognized the scarred case, the cracked corner, the smudge of dirt near the charging port. Gabriel held it out. You're going to call him. Davina froze. Her throat went dry. She glanced at the monitor again. Brian's head was lowered. He looked exhausted, half conscious. She didn't know if he could even hold a conversation. Gabriel continued, I want you to reassure him. Convince him to cooperate. Convince him everything I've told him is true. Davina's pulse thundered. She remembered the warning, don't trust the one driving you. Her hesitation lasted half a second too long. Gabriel's expression sharpened. If you falter, he said, voice flat, he dies. The chill in the room deepened. Something in Gabriel's eyes had gone predatorial. Davina swallowed, nodded, took the phone with trembling fingers. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She whispered a prayer. She didn't dare speak out loud. The phone rang only once. Then Brian picked up. His voice was hoarse, slurred from exhaustion and pain. Davina, where are you? Her breath hitched. She wanted to scream the truth, wanted to tell him to run, wanted to tell him she was coming, that she would tear the whole world down if it meant getting to him.
But Gabriel stepped closer. his presence a dark shadow at her back. Davina kept her tone soft, gentle, controlled. "I'm coming," she said. "Trust me." There was a ragged inhale on the other end. "No," Brian whispered. "No, Davina, listen to me. Don't. It's a trap." The words sliced through her chest. Gabriel's jaw tightened. His eyes flashed. He moved toward the monitor, toward the controls, toward a button Davina very much did not want him to press. Brian's breathing quickened. She could hear the panic, the desperation. She could almost feel the fear radiating through the line. "Davina, please," he said. "Please don't come here. You don't know what he's—" The line went dead. The abrupt silence was louder than the warehouse hum. Davina stared at the phone, numb, shaking. Gabriel plucked it from her hand. "He's smarter than I thought," he murmured. The comment wasn't admiration. It was irritation. Davina forced herself to meet his gaze. "What now?" Gabriel studied her in a way that made her feel dissected. "Now," he said, tucking the phone into his pocket, "we see if you're willing to do what comes next." "Which is?" He smiled. And Davina realized she'd never seen Gabriel smile like that before. It was a smile without warmth, without humanity, without restraint. A smile that meant danger. He stepped toward her, closer, closer still until she could smell the faint trace of iron on his clothes, until she had to tilt her chin up to hold his gaze. "Tell me something, Davina," he said quietly. "Did Brian ever tell you the truth about why all of this started?" A tremor ran through her. "What truth?" "The truth," Gabriel whispered, "about Roseville, about the money, about the signatures, about who really forged them." Davina blinked. "He didn't forge anything." Gabriel's smile widened, slow, cruel. "You really don't know, do you?" She stumbled back a step, pulse skyrocketing. "You're lying." "Oh, I'm many things. But tonight, I'm not lying." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small black folder. Placed it gently on the desk beside the monitors. Davina stared. "What is that?" "The truth," Gabriel said. "And you're going to read it." Her hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside were documents. Pages and pages of them. Financial records. Handwriting samples. Signatures that looked exactly like Brian's, but not quite. Her vision blurred. She dropped the folder as though it had scorched her. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be." "Can't be true?" Gabriel asked, stepping closer again. "Or can't be what you were prepared to face?" Davina backed away, but the warehouse wall met her spine. Gabriel leaned in, voice low. "You want to save him?"
A pause. "Prove it." Her breathing fractured. "How?" she whispered. Gabriel reached into another drawer, but this time pulling out not documents, not a phone, but a key. He placed it in her palm, and for a split second, Davina felt hope flare in her chest. "Is this to free him?" she asked. Gabriel chuckled. "No, Davina." He leaned close, his breath cold against her ear. It's to free someone else. The words punched the air from her lungs. Who? She whispered. Gabriel's answer was a whisper of its own. Someone Brian never knew was alive. Davina's knees nearly buckled. Take the key, Gabriel said, stepping back. Go to the room at the end of the hall. Bring him to me. Her thoughts spun, panic rising, breathing sharp and uneven. If you do this, then I'll let Brian live, Gabriel said. And if I don't? He didn't blink, didn't hesitate, didn't soften. Then you'll watch him die. Davina stared at the key in her hand. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Slowly, mechanically, she turned toward the hall. The lights flickered overhead. Shadows stretched long across the concrete. Every step felt like stepping deeper into something she wouldn't survive. At the end of the hall, a heavy door waited. The lock glinted. The key grew heavier in her palm. Davina inhaled once, twice. Then she slid the key into the lock, turned it. The mechanism clicked. She pushed the door open, and her breath tore from her throat. Her eyes widened. Her entire body froze. Because standing inside the room was someone she thought was dead. Someone Brian had sworn to bury. Someone who should never have been alive. And as the figure stepped into the light, he whispered her name. Davina. She stumbled backward, terror flooding her body. The figure smiled. Did you miss me?
It was Matthias, Brian's brother, whom they believed was long dead.
Chapter 8. Light After the Storm. The room was silent, but Davina's pulse thundered. Gabriel had locked her inside and vanished, leaving her alone with nothing but shadows, a single flickering bulb, and the weight of a choice she didn't dare make too quickly. The moment she was sure he wouldn't return, she yanked her phone from her pocket. One unread message from the unknown number glowed on the screen. Warehouse is a decoy. He's being moved tonight. Her stomach dropped. So the recording Gabriel showed her wasn't live. Brian wasn't here. Her breaths came sharp and fast. She scanned the room for anything she could use. Her fingers brushed the baseboard, the underside of a chair, and then a scrap of paper, folded tiny, hidden behind the chair leg. Elias's handwriting. Trust no one. The key isn't what he thinks. She barely had a second to process the meaning before the door swung open. Gabriel stood there, his eyes locked onto the paper in her hand. So, you're already lying to me. Davina's heartbeat turned to ice. I was praying, she whispered. Gabriel stepped closer, head tilting as he studied her. You're clever, Davina, but not clever enough. She swallowed. I am loyal. Let me prove it. A smirk cut across his face. Oh, you will, one way or another. He turned and left again, locking the door behind him. That night, Davina fell into a restless half-sleep until she heard something. A faint thud, a dragging sound, a voice. Brian's voice. Her eyes flew open. The sound was coming from beneath the floor. Her breath hitched as she knelt, pressing her palm to the wood panels. Brian? She whispered, and through the darkness, faint, muffled, came her name. An hour later, the door burst open again. Matthias slipped inside, face pale, breath shaking. Davina, you need to move. Now. He shut the door behind him and crouched beside her. Gabriel left to check the airfield. If we're quiet, I can get you out. Matthias, Brian is here.
Below us. His eyes widened. How did you? Never mind. Come. He hurried her down a narrow hallway Davina hadn't noticed before. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of lights, the creak of metal, her own heartbeat punching against her ribs. At the back of the corridor, Matthias knelt beside a steel floor grate. He fumbled with a rink of keys, hands shaking. This place used to be part of an old cold storage facility. He swallowed. Gabriel hit him down there, said it was necessary. And you let him? Davina's voice cracked with betrayal she didn't have time to process. Matthias's face broke. I was afraid of him, of losing everything, but I'm not afraid anymore. The lock snapped open. Davina climbed down the ladder before Matthias warned her about the darkness. He lowered a flashlight after her, and she swept its beam across the small concrete chamber. A heavy metal cell door glinched in the corner. Brian? Her voice trembled. A weak groan answered. She ran to the bars. He lifted his head, bruised and exhausted, but alive. Davina. His voice broke. I knew you'd come. Her hands curled around the bars. Tears spilled hot and fast. I'm here. I'm here. God, I'm so sorry you went through this. Matthias unlocked the door with shaking hands. As soon as it swung open, Davina pulled Brian into her arms. He leaned into her, trembling with relief and exhaustion. You shouldn't be here. I know, but God made a way. Brian exhaled shakily. He always does. They were halfway up the ladder when a door slammed open above. Matthias froze. Brian stiffened. Davina felt the dread before she heard the voice. Well, isn't this a precious little moment? Matthias stepped back, trembling. Gabriel descended slowly, a pistol glinting in his hand. Matthias,
You disappoint me.
I gave you everything. Authority, access, trust. And this is how you repay me? Matthias lifted his hands. Gabriel, please. A gunshot cracked. Davina screamed. Matthias fell. Gabriel stepped closer, boots echoing on the concrete. You all think you're heroes. You think God is on your side, but he chose me. Me! He raised the gun towards Davina's chest. Brian stepped in front of her despite his weakness. You touch her, and you will answer to God. Gabriel laughed. I answered to no one. He pulled the trigger. Drop your weapon. Floodlights exploded across the warehouse. Elias emerged with 3 officers, guns raised, expressions ice cold. Gabriel spun. One of the officers fired first. The bullet struck Gabriel's hand. He screamed, the gun flying from his grip. Officers rushed him as he tackled to the ground, and he shouted threats that no longer mattered. Brian exhaled a broken sob of relief. Davina collapsed into his arms, shaking. It's over, Elias said, kneeling beside them. Davina, he can't hurt you anymore. But as Davina knelt beside Matthias's lifeless body, she knew the cost of the truth would never be forgotten. 2 days later, the council chamber overflowed. Whispers of guilt, shock, regret. Brian sat at the head table, bruised but steady, his presence humbling the room into silence. Elias presented the flash drive, Gabriel's full financial trail. The board replayed the warehouse recording, the proof of the kidnapping, the attempt to flee, the cell buried beneath the floor. Matthias's sworn testimony played next. The truth was undeniable. By noon, Pastor Brian Robert was fully exonerated. By afternoon, Gabriel still was charged on multiple counts. By evening, Roosevelt finally breathed again. Brian stood from the panel's table, voice soft but unwavering. I forgive him because Christ forgave me first. And may this church never again confuse control with the leadership or fear with holiness. The room wept. Davina did too. That evening, with the mission grounds quiet and washed in golden sunset, Brian and Davina walked slowly along the familiar gravel path. I thought I'd die there, Brian admitted softly. But God kept whispering, not yet. Davina took his hand. I heard you calling me, even when I thought I was imagining it. Maybe that was God too. The breeze carried the scent of rain-washed earth. Peace settled over them, gentle and warm, like the hand of God laid carefully on their shoulders.
Brian stopped walking. Davina, everything we've endured, I don't want it to break us. I want it to shape us. Her breath trembled. It already has. He lifted her hands, cradling them reverently. I want to walk forward with truth, with grace, with you. Tears filled her eyes. Yes, with you. Brian leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. I love you, Davina. I love you too, she whispered. Above them, the last light of day broke through the clouds, turning the world gold. The darkness had taken its best shot, but it failed because love endured, truth prevailed, and God always finished what he began. Thank you for listening. If you like this audio recording, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our audio recordings.